All right, we are recording. Um, so first, question or comments on the midterm exam. And like I said, we'll talk about professional development and other stuff later, letters of rec. Questions. All right, Matt,
Um,
Nicholas. Sorry, Nicholas.
no, all good. Doesn't really have anything to do with midterms. I just had a question. Is it just me, or does anyone else see something in the trees of the background? Like there's something sticking out
In my
on your back?
background,
Yes. Like, am I the only one seeing this, or like
I,
show of
I
hands?
see myself and I just see a statue.
It looks like Pennywise,
Oh,
actually.
yeah, that's
Oh, thank
Pennywise.
God.
I have that in all my lectures. It's up on my wall. So I'm not in
Ah,
Costa Rica now. This was from a grant that you'll be on. The thing about soft power. Thanks for. I figured everyone would always
I
catch
really.
that sooner or later. All right, Milan.
Yeah, hi. Can we talk about offensive realism and the Benghazi tragedy?
Of course. So, offensive realism is the idea that states expand naturally, regardless of who's in power, and let's say the type of government it is, etc. So in offensive realism, and that's a great question to start, is that they not only expand these self-interested institutions. However, there's a big problem here with offensive realism is that states expand to their own peril. If you look at the costliness, for example, of the Iraq War, Afghanistan, they took over with lightning fast speed, the Taliban, even someone a little older than you, not much. If you said the Taliban was going to take over Afghanistan after, we invaded, people would be like, "Oh, you're crazy," And look at what happened. So, offensive realism is an interesting theory that states states don't just defend themselves, they expand. Even with Trump where he fired Bolton, said he was a warmongering pig and all this stuff. Now he's saying we're going to Gaza. We want Greenland. That is exactly what Mersheimer talks about, but it's often against the state's interest. They just expand because there's no balancer. And is that the United States? Is that what the United States is doing, even under Trump, who says he's against war, going into these areas? And there is pushback from his base. Excellent question to begin with. And then, Emily, go ahead.
I was just wondering on like offensive realism, what's the difference between that and imperial overstretch?
That is very similar to imperial overstretch. With Mearsheimer tries to take the theory. That's an excellent question, by the way, because like they are very similar. If you begin with offensive realism to go into imperial overstretch. But remember, imperial overstretch sometimes has the word imperialism in it. So countries do expand, even smaller ones that aren't empires. Great example, Vietnam. They defeat the Chinese, they kicked us out, and then they went to Vietnam and installed their own puppet government. Then they went to Cambodia, sorry, and installed the puppet government. Turkey in Azerbaijan, states basically do expand. Imperial overstretch is more taking over large swaths of land. Russia, that's why it fell. Japan, Great Britain, that it can't handle. That's a great question. I'll put that on the exam. Let me. I'm not on my phone. I want to put down things that come up in the exam. Excellent question. Go ahead. So those are two we're definitely putting on. Who wants to go next? Or you people know everything. Oops.
And the Benghazi tragedy, please.
Oh, that's right. That's the bureaucratic politics model. If you take a look at that article, just listen to the lecture where there was bureaucratic infighting between the State Department and the CIA and others, and it gets into that bureaucratic infighting. It's turf wars, etc., that goes on in the U.S. government. So to understand foreign policy, we not only need to understand, um, the rational act of states expand. We have to understand the bureaucrats around them. So like that idea is look at the Trump administration. Don't worry so much about Trump. What is Tulsi Gabbard's role? What is RFK's role? Who has the ear of the president and how they fight for power within the foreign policy apparatus, which is huge. Marco Rubio. I still don't think he's going to be a powerful player. I don't think Trump really respects him. I just think he did it because he's Latino and, to show he's not against the Latinos. But that's my own thing. Don't listen to me.
He could have
Excellent
gone. He
question.
could have gone with Ted Cruz, though.
Yeah, but I think he hates Ted Cruz more. Okay, I'm gonna ask Noah with the promise you're not gonna crash.
No, I'm not driving. See, no hands.
Oh, okay, good.
So, we've spent the last couple of weeks in Pennsylvania. Now we're headed back to New Jersey. So you mentioned the bureaucratic politics model for the Benghazi tragedy.
Right.
So for the actual bureaucratic politics model, is that what it's going to be as well? It's just
Yeah, if there's a question on that, it'll be like that. What is, say, the point of the Benghazi tragedy?
Okay, gotcha.
That would be
Thank you, sir.
of mentioning it. It's a tragedy. It was sad. The ambassador got killed. And also is that imperial overstretch going into Libya without even a plan. I mean, we don't even have an embassy anymore in Libya. So it's kind of an issue.
Yeah.
Who else has a question?
Professor, what about the unipolar world? What are you looking for that?
Yeah, it's just the unipolar world means that there's only one power. It seems like we're going into a multipolar world where we're being challenged from, a U.S. perspective, Russia, even Iran, spreading in Iraq, etc. So that just means unipolar, that there's one world. But what the challenge to that is the multipolar world that's developing. Are we in a new Cold War? So the way that if anything goes on the unipolar world, it's what does that represent? And that's the Soviet dominance, the U.S. dominance after the fall of the Soviet Union. But that's being challenged now as countries catch up. So what kind of policies do we need? I think that's why Trump wants Greenland, because I think he wants to expand into the Arctic, and even say because of China and stuff like that. So these have real policy implications. I'm going to put that down on my little notes. Good question. What else? Anything? Go ahead, Nicholas.
I guess my question is, what do you think Trump's plan to get Greenland would make him so distinct from the previous administrations?
I did a lecture on that before. You'll watch. I want to quickly, we can talk about that after. I want to kind of go over the exam first. But I think those are awesome questions. Isabel?
Yeah, I was wondering if you'd be able to discuss a little more of the offshore balancing.
That's a good one. Offshore balancing is essentially, and this is what Trump's doing, and even the administration before, it's to beef up your allies so you can withdraw from certain regions. So a great example is Japan. We are now, there's a big movement in the Constitution of Japan. You can't have a military. We want that gone. These people that subscribe to that theory. We want to beef up Brazil, Lula, or Bolsonaro. It doesn't matter. We want other countries who are allies with us to share the costs. And Trump says that, like with NATO, they should be sharing more of the costs. That's the offshore balancing approach. Japan is a big one because Japan could be a regional power, but it is somewhat constrained. And now we're beginning to send weapons and military might to Japan. I think, and remember, there's a lot of backlash to what Emily just said, imperial overstretch. So if we withdraw a little, that might be good also for our soft power. Noah.
For your article on the discourse on foreign policy, is that the?
It's funny. I don't know how to write it apart from the importance of discourse in foreign policy. But related to that, you'll have to know, like Dora Maria Tejas, who I talk about, Sandino, how in some ways this is like an interpretive view of the world, where in the United States they were viewed as bandits, terrorists, etc., but in their own country, heroes. That's incredibly important to understand because we'll say, like, for example, in foreign policy, we're going in as to liberate Iraq, but do the Iraqis see it that way? That's one of the important things of an interpretive point of view, is that the world's a big place. Not everyone's going to see the world like you. And that's very, very important to understand.
Got it. So like
Brianna?
terrorist versus
Oh,
freedom
sorry,
fighter.
Noah?
So like terrorist versus like the discourse in like terrorist versus freedom fighter.
Well, yeah, exactly. That's one of the things of discourse. Anyone here wants to study law, I'm working as an expert witness, and discourse is very, very important. As someone in exile or quote unquote illegal, right? Discourse plays a role. Someone's in exile or refugee, they deserve different treatment than quote unquote illegal, if you use that term. Brianna?
Sorry, my thing wasn't working. What will you be asking about the open door policy? And then I'm not sure if it'll be related to the test, but how do the tariffs affect the open door policy in foreign policy?
Yeah, that's an excellent question. You're going to see a video later on tariffs
Okay.
that I do with Trump against economic liberalism. It does go against somewhat the open door to a certain degree, because the open door approach is basically we're using economics to expand. Why do states expand? Mersheimer is like, well, we expand because it's in our interest. But this gets into, well, what's in our interest? And it's more economic interest. It comes from, like, I believe the 1800s, when we were kind of like expanding throughout different countries, and we wanted to open up their markets for our own corporations and self-interest. So that's like the Colombian article. If you read that, the one I authored is an open door approach, where it's like, why do we have Plan Colombia? It's not necessarily a rational actor model. It's more the United States wants to sell things, wants to Monsanto, the CIA, State Department wants money. So it's a more economic approach to U.S. foreign policy.
Do you think that this is affecting relationships with Canada and Mexico? I don't know if that would qualify as offshore balancing, but don't you think that that would limit
The
our offshore?
opposite. Yeah, I
Right.
think it's I don't know, when we get into that part, we're going to discuss it. We just did in class, where we don't know the long-term effects. On the one hand, when he did it with Colombia, it was like a targeted thing. We want you to take these military blah 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 on a military jet. If you start just saying tariffs all the time, blanketly against
Mhm.
countries, after a while, they're going to call you bluff. But not only that, will they then solidify a block against you where they'll balance you? So that is relevant in the sense that the William Walker video, where the Central Americans countries who hate each other came together for a common enemy, the fear I would have from a U.S. policy perspective is that our country's going to not necessarily gang up and invade us. That's not the point. But can they do things that make it more difficult for us? People forget in U.S. foreign policy, smaller countries have power. When we pissed off Turkey for something, I forget even what it was during the Afghan war, before you were alive, Turkey said that you can't use our airspace. That really was detrimental to U.S. policy in Afghanistan. So, and the same thing goes with Xiomara in Honduras, where she's like, if you want to treat our immigrants like that, we're going to kick out your bases. So, what I think is nerve-wracking about the continued use of tariffs is, will this country start saying, well, we're not going to trade with you as much. We're going to go to, China, say, and it'll solidify countries that don't like each other, like China and Russia, and just solidify their fortification more. This is what happened, I think, with the Russian invasion of Ukraine. It pushed countries that didn't want to go into NATO into NATO. Is Trump's, kind of rhetoric and other things going to push countries like in that direction too? I don't know. That's something we have to see. So these are all awesome questions.
That was actually going to be like an extension question off of that. Would you say that his decision, if he does decide to pull out of Ukraine, would be an effect, or would affect offshore balancing, or do you think that Ukraine isn't enough of a power in the
Right.
world
Well,
to
yeah,
keep
it's not
offshore?
enough power. It wouldn't be an offshore balancer. I think the big offshore balancers are the EU with
Okay.
NATO, and then Turkey's in NATO, and then Brazil, Saudi Arabia, Japan. These are our big regional powerful friends that they think, an offshore balancer says they should be doing more of a job in these areas. The Ukraine, historically, some of you might not remember, you're too young, was always considered corrupt, bad, backwards, anti-Semitic. David Duke got his PhD from there. Not a great country in the Western media, but then when it was invaded, we developed the sympathy for it. I'm not saying it's true or not. I'm just saying that's how the media represented in what I read a lot about the Ukraine years ago, particularly after the fall of the Soviet Union. Christina?
Yes, sorry, can you hear me okay?
Yeah, perfect.
I'm driving, so
Oh, don't.
I don't have the I don't have the list in front of me, but I thought I saw something about the Mussolini monument being
Oh yeah,
erected. What is
is
about that?
that and the Colombian protests basically ask the question, do countries care about democracy, human rights, or about interest? So if you look at the Colombian protest thing you saw, I just did a little thing at the beginning, and then I was in the Colombian protest. They brutalized those students, right? We didn't care because Colombia is an
Yeah.
ally. The second thing is that in the Mussolini one, it's a Mussolini in Chicago. I mean, a statue's still there. It's not of Mussolini. It was actually his general that sent it. It's pretty interesting. No one even in Chicago really knows about it. But because of the Italian population, etc., that we had actually good relations with Mussolini. So the question is, does that, do powers, not just the United States, support democracy? Or do they support more so like just their self-interest, regardless of whether they're fascist, communist, whatever? Because we had a lot of relations with communist countries in the Cold War, people forget. So yeah, that's an excellent question. So that begets the question that the United States doesn't always support democracy, but more interests and allies. And that gets behind me, Jose Figueres, the United States, by not overthrowing Jose Figueres in Costa Rica, actually did a good thing by not expanding into Costa Rica, because then Jose Figueres, not everyone loves him, of course, but a lot of people, say that because of that, let me transcribe. Jose Figueres, got rid of the military. He did land reform, social security, etc., made Costa Rica a more stable place. And that's the point of asking about Jose Figueres. Oh, and don't forget the Monroe Doctrine. My argument is that the Monroe Doctrine and the Spanish American War marked a pivotal point when the United States started expanding as an empire. Because, remember, we weren't always an empire. Well, I'm not saying we're an empire now, but, we're pretty much everywhere. Whether you want to use that thing. Let me see if there's, yeah, you people hit it. Bureaucratic politics model, offshore balancing, Colombia student protests, and Mussolini are in the same question. Dora Maria Diaz. Oh, Dora Maria Diaz, the interpretive understanding of the world. So even though we might say someone's a terrorist, like think about it, the Brits would say, oh, the United States, the farmers, Washington, all are terrorists, bandits. But for us, now that we won, woohoo, we are no longer that. Offshore balancing, offensive realism, open door push. Remember, I do this in policy oriented stuff. So a foreign policy analyst who draws upon these theories, how do they see the world? So imperial overstretch, definitely that'll be on there now, is that, powerful countries in particular, do overstretch against their own interest. Offensive realism can be applied more broadly, but like the imperial overstretch is definitely the Soviet Union. I mean, what was it doing with Kazakhstan, Turkmenistan, Uzbekistan? I mean, that's huge imperial overstretch. But are we imperial overstretch too, by trying to control a broad area of the world? Now, I guess. Gaza is going to be in the hands of the United States, said Trump, the new Riviera, which probably is not going to happen. And if we went there, there would probably be a lot of backlash. Go ahead, Milan.
Can we talk about the Hoffman's hybrid threats article?
That was the next thing I was going to say, because no one asked about that. So that definitely needs to be talked about. He just challenges, in that case, it's like, I have had a lot of soldiers, so I've enjoyed listening to them about this. Petraeus, he kind of challenges the Petraeus doctrine by adding 2 additional schools of thought on world threats. That, you need not just, it's not this easy dichotomy between whether you do counterinsurgency or state actors or something like that, that you need basically soldiers and other military personnel, possibly the State Department, to study in a broad range of areas, or you could do more comparative advantage stuff. I went out actually to a conference at this defense university for national security where he was there and a few others. I couldn't find it because it's not on the GPS. It's in the middle of North Carolina, and I was asking him about that. It's like they call it Vietnam as Vietnam because it's only soldiers. It's right in the middle of North Carolina. It was crazy. And I was asking about hybrid threats and what Bookie's doing and all these other people. And it's basically, to answer your question, how we train the military, right? Should the military be trained in, say, foreign languages? Should the military be trained in state building? Should they be trained in counterinsurgency? Should they be? So he's kind of challenging the Petraeus doctrine as being too simple-minded, that it needs to be you remember, these are military people I'm drawing on. It's not my own thing because I wasn't in the military. So I draw upon them at the defense university that we have. And their argument is, the Petraeus is way too superficial with his argument. It seemed to be my interpretation. And don't forget, Petraeus a long time ago had an affair with a woman who was writing a biography on him. So there you go. That won't be on the quiz. Go ahead, Emily.
I was just curious on Hoffman's like 4 types of like competing skills. Does the like concept of like deniability and invisibility, like is that exclusively to counter insurgents?
Yeah,
or
that's
kinda
more
all?
counterinsurgency. That's great. I will put that. Let me put that on the exam. Remember, any question on the exam extra is good because that means that it's all extra. And so if I throw something on there, it's not like, oh, there's another, in my class, the more the better. Always. That was the whole point of the point structure, is that then if you lose something, you can regain it and stuff like that. The whole deniability, I do that in a few classes, and that's more counterinsurgency because it's so difficult to root out the whole, these insurgents because you don't know who they are. I was a professor in Nicaragua, so I actually taught a lot of people who were in the guerrilla war. And these people who are older wanted to learn English. In the daytime, they were like young students. And then in the nighttime, they went out and, killed people or destroyed the electricity, whatever, to overthrow the Somoza government. That's in Nicaragua. And also, I had guerrillas from El Salvador. Guerrilla is an insurgent who aims to overthrow the government. And I also was in Colombia in dealing with the insurgents too. But there is one thing I want to do. So that is all counterinsurgency. I'll definitely put that on. There's a great, I don't know if I put it on. I'm going to send it out. Let me put on that video. And then I can ask a question on it. It's from the Battle of Algiers, a movie. And I gotta send it out because now Battle of Algiers. And it's how they used women. Because why would they use women in Algeria to fight the French, to kick the French out in the 1950s? Why do you think they might use women? At that time, particularly. And they'd blow things up. What do you think? Why women?
Oh, I know that answer. It's Christina.
Go
I
ahead.
think I learned this from the last class I had with you. They used the women because they were more convincing and they were basically like undercover. I mean, you wouldn't suspect a woman is
Right.
going to do anything to you.
Yeah, I'll send that out. Yeah, women, they really like as in that insurgencies, because you wouldn't expect a woman, particularly at that time, and a Muslim woman, to be involved. Now it's different. Now, never trust a woman. They'll definitely blow you up. But back then, they used them quite astutely. I'll send out that thing. And the other thing is, I wanted to stress is hybrid threats. Hybrid threats. The Talking Heads video is basically, their argument is that ISIS was a spinoff of the invasion of Iraq. That after they basically debaptized the Iraqi army, all these Sunnis had weapons, knew what to do with them. They were in the military, and then they were asked to leave. They had no jobs, and many went into ISIS in order to protect their families and others. It's a very interesting concept. Good question. What else do we have? How many minutes we got? We got a couple more minutes before my national security jumps in. Some people here might be in national security. What else? Nicholas.
Mine's I guess a clarification question.
Yeah.
Will the midterm be the same like the other quizzes, like all multiple choice, or should we prepare for like short essay answers?
Oh, good. I didn't get rid of them. All multiple choice. Why? Because these classes are very big. If you like say fill in the blank, doesn't make sense because then someone says, oh, Petraeus wrong. Who knows how to spell Petraeus? I wouldn't know how to spell Petraeus, right? So there's 4,000 different, ways to spell Petraeus, people. So they say, hey, I got this right. And then, and then true or false is too easy. So it's exactly like it. And that's a good question. I want you to stress one thing. It is 1 point each. Not because the quiz is a 0.5. So I wanted to bring that up.
Thank you.
Yeah, excellent. Any other quick questions before I jump into national security? Now, if you want to Zoom another time to talk about like later, usually the midterm reviews go faster. Like this was kind of fast. But the final is a little longer because people start asking about final paper, professional development advice, obviously, letters of recommendation. What do I do? Different things. So I will have a full hour on the final Zoom, so that'll give you more space. So we'll do 20 minutes on the actual review of the final exam, but then I'll open it up for questions about different professional development questions or whatever you want. Do you understand? Because sometimes people always say, what do I do on the paper? Do I need the paper? And do I, if I get a letter of rec, we remember this. I'll tell you what to write in the emails and stuff like that. But the thing about on the online classes, if you want a letter of rec, make sure you list the debate, short descriptions, papers, you participated in Zoom, you did all this kind of cool stuff to weave into the letter of recommendation, because you do not want a generic letter of recommendation. That can kill you. Some jerk professor, look at Isabel, works so hard, works full time, works hard, gets an A, 4.0, and then some jerk professor gives her a crappy letter. Generic, not crappy, but generic. Like, oh, you're very responsible. That's not going to help you. So one of the things I'm going to do is a big thing on, professional development, particularly for online students. Are you all online or you are mostly online? All right.
Yes.
Well, we know you on that's right. A lot of you said you're not even in Arizona. All right, then I'm going to get out of this one and then I'm going to go into my national security one, if that's okay.
Thank you.
And any questions,
Thank
community
you.
forum, or send me an email. We Zoom sometime. Take care, everyone.
Thank
I'll
you,
have to
sir.
come
Have a
back
good
to
night.
you.
national security because that'll